Hey y'all, we're the good doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Erin.
I'm Dr. Kristen.
You are very, very welcome to our discussion today. We are doctors, we have PhDs in social science, and we firmly believe that curiosity will lead you down the path towards being more empathetic and building a more inclusive community, thus solving all the world's problems. No, I kid. But we do believe in earnest that they're very, very important things, and they guide our principles here at Abbey Research. We also love to talk about culture. We like the intersection of all of these things, and it guides our content coverage in anything from, race and representation in The Handmaid's Tale, body shape diversity in Bridgerton, why people care so darn much about flags. If there's an element of culture we can talk about popped or lived, we will. We talk to each other all the time except when we're sleeping, but we really like talking to you as well. So make sure that wherever you are engaging with this content, you do all of the content platform appropriate things: liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, tweeting. Pick a verb. Please do it. We would love to hear from you, and we can't wait to.
This is part of our series of coverage of Marvel's The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We've talked in previous videos in this series about why we're doing it, and the reasons stand. Last episode was pretty long, and I thought it was going to be the longest episode, and then I remembered everything that happened in this episode, so this one may also be a little bit of time. Sorry, not sorry, but the episode 5 of Truth of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier provides us a lot of opportunities to talk about a lot of elements of culture that Dr. Hinson just explained. So let's get started. Right. We open with Dollar Store Cap, who is flashing back. They brought this up in the Vulture recap, and I want to bring it up in ours as well, because this is so important. Instead of flashing back to the murder he committed, he's flashing back to Lamar.
What caused him to do the murder?
He just can't do this job. He just cannot do his job. So he's running. He runs into our boys. They have a really fantastically choreographed fight sequence.
Lots of symbolism in this fight.
So much symbolism. Also some snark. Thank you, writers, for bringing the buddy cop. Like, really, at this point, the thing with Sam and Bucky this whole season has been like, we're partners, we're not partners, we're whatever. Like, what do they call each other has been like a thing. And this is the first hint that, like, yeah, we need to call them teammates. Mm-hmm. Like, whether they call themselves that or not, they are behaving like that right now for sure.
Yeah.
So they wrench the shield back from Walker. We see that they work as a team, which Walker and Lamar never did.
No.
They were never a team.
They were never equals, like,
ever. And that's when the Avengers worked, it was when they all worked out of their own strengths, but not in a hierarchy. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really important. So then Sam tries to talk, and I shouldn't say then, in the middle of this, Sam tries to talk to Walker, and Walker is just not having it. He is so head up. I think at this point too, Sam and Bucky realize he has the serum. And they're like, oh shit.
They're like, oh damn.
And things are not great. Then we're with Dollar Store Cap, we go to DC. With Bucky, we go and see Zemo. And with Sam, we go back to Louisiana. And all of those things are important stories that are much more thematic, and kind of along the lines. So of those 3 storylines, Dr. Erin, which one would you like to talk about first?
I would like to talk about Locale Cap.
Okay.
Because if memory serves, that was one of the last things I talked about in our episode 4 recap, was this idea of the man John Walker was made. And some of John Walker is John Walker and his personality and how he sees the world. But we spent a lot of time in episode 4 recap talking about the impact of the Cap propaganda on him, the impact of the military industrial complex, especially in America, kind of making him out to be who he was and to shape his worldview and his view of his role as Captain America. So I think for me, I'm so glad they gave us that scene. Even if it was a little truncated at parts, but it was so important to give him the space to say, and I'm reading straight from the Vulture recap, straight from the episode. He's before a tribunal, a council of people being chastised for murdering someone. And he says, I only ever did what you asked of me, what you told me to be and trained me to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, nail on the head. And the response of the council was like, we're not there's no accountability from them in understanding the culture that they have created.
No.
And the toxic nature of it. Toxic masculinity or shallow masculinity in John Walker, certainly, but also a very shallow culture, if we want to use the same term, within the U.S. military and their approach to just go be Captain America, like the same exact Captain America.
That's what we want. We just want that again, which also shows that they didn't know Steve. Because
yeah, and they like, and you know that an institution misunderstands humans and what motivates them and how they are made.
Happens on a day that ends in Y.
Exactly. Literally every day of our lives. But to me, you know, we talk about institutions a lot in our work here at Abbey Research. And so I loved that they brought in the institution of the U.S. military and gave Locale Cap that opportunity to be like, y'all made me.
And Fandom Corner, every time they were like, bring us back the shield, I was like, the shield is not yours! The shield is not yours!
As we said in episode 4, there's some Elder Wand, Harry Potter level magic with the shield, and you just can't like take it and give it at will.
No, it just doesn't work like that.
No.
Also, I want to say that this is a fascinating conversation about murder in the name of a state, full stop.
Oh, yeah.
And because I think what Dollar Store Cap would tell us, what John would say, is that he was killing the Flag Smasher because the Flag Smasher killed an American operative.
Yeah, it's just yeah.
That's it. It's an eye for an eye. That's it. And so state-sanctioned violence and the accountability and responsibility for state-sanctioned violence is something we've been wrestling with as a species since Nuremberg. Now, definitely before that, but kind of publicly and more blatantly since the Nuremberg trials. Can you ask a Nazi foot soldier to be accountable for his actions if he was following orders?
Right. And I think especially, I mean, we've always dehumanized and othered people that we're in conflict with in order to justify actions against them, oppression, subjugation, murder, violence, etc.
The whole nine.
But the most recent iteration of that in the United States has been our war on terror. And so we're presuming John is also a product of that environment in which the media and the military and the government present enemies of the state and the institution as not human.
And then also he's in the middle of this and they have fought actual aliens in this planet. Like they know there are like,
we know there are not human creatures.
Yeah.
With weapons. So like, it's so layered. And, you know, there was no other response for the council to have than to not understand it, because institutions never understand the impact of this dehumanization. But that, you know, that's more of the baggage that John Walker carries that Steve didn't. And he's got like a caboose train car full of baggage that he's carting around with him.
God love him.
Bless. So, I mean, we don't get a lot more from John Walker in this. We get the appearance of Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And if you called that, anybody out there in the Tinternets listening to this, like, I will buy you a coffee.
No, as soon as she said her name, I knew who she was, but I definitely did not call that character or her showing up.
But absolutely genius. Huge fans of Julia Louis-Dreyfus. The Good Doctors are. And so, in the Vulture parlance, she's going to be the Steve Bannon for John Walker. And then we set John aside until the end when we see him making his own shields not from vibranium.
Oh, sweetheart.
Oh,
Go to therapy.
I just remember watching that scene going, buddy, that's not going to work the way you think.
Like, oh, you sweet summer child, that is not gonna be okay.
Oh, honey, you're not Tony Stark tinkering in his garage. No. But I think that's locale cap for this. So I think we can park him until episode 6, in which he's clearly coming back with that janky shield. Would you like to talk about Bucky or Sam next?
Just because Bucky ends up like colliding into Sam's story, let's end the Zemo of it. So we see Bucky, one of the very like clips that came out, I think it was in the Super Bowl ad, was of Sebastian Stan holding a gun and pointing it at the camera.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of speculation over who that was going to be. And as soon as it came out that Zemo was going to be in the show, a lot of fandom was like, well, obviously he's going to shoot Zemo. Like, obviously it's Zemo. And what was fascinating about the scene is that Winter Soldier Bucky would have shot him with no questions. And this new kind of more settled in his skin White Wolf version that he is continually becoming faked him out. Turns him over to Io and the Dora Milaje. Io says he's going to the raft. This doesn't actually help us because he's been broken out of the raft. Other people have been broken out of the raft. We have not seen the last of Helmet Zemo. Do not worry your pretty little head. Also, there's some question about, there was an old guy in a, like later on in episode 6, we're going to forget to mention this. There was an old guy in a fancy car who murders somebody, and everyone's like, who the hell was that? That was Zemo's driver. He's a Baron. Like, he is, like, his name is Baron Helmet von Zemo.
Yeah, we didn't discuss the like lifestyles of the rich and famous element of Zemo coming back, but in the earlier episodes. But that was one of my favorite like side things, where he was like, "Would you like to see my garage full of cars and all of my fur-lined coats?"
Like, he was a really, really big deal in his country, and still has a lot of assets. And within the Marvel universe, he's always Baron Zemo. So that's an important thing to remember. We are absolutely going to see him again, also because they're idiots to not work with Daniel Bruhl more.
Oh my God, because he's just genius, and like, why would you waste that talent?
Oh my gosh, Marvel casting for the movies, with like 2 exceptions that I take notions with, and I don't care for the casting. 2, knocked it out of the park.
Oh yeah, I think the only person that like upset me originally was like Terrence Howard as Rhodey, and they course corrected.
Fair. I really don't like Renner as Clint.
You're not a Renner fan, I know.
I'm not a Renner fan. It's not the right energy for Clint as I perceive Clint, but that's okay. And then I would have cast somebody different for Pepper. I would have cast somebody more sarcastic, but
or somebody who remembered that they were in Marvel films.
They were in Marvel. There was a lot of rumors flying around that it was supposed to be Sandra Bullock, and like the idea of Sandra Bullock and Robert Downey Jr. sparring with each other like lives rent free in my head. So like that would have been, and Jensen Ackles was supposed to be who's in Supernatural and has much more of the sarcastic kind of.
He's much more. Yeah, Clint.
What I think of as Clint, especially from Matt Fraction's run of Hawkeye, but we're getting into Fandom Corner. So we're moving ourselves from Fandom Corner. Io is clear to tell Bucky not to come to Wakanda, which we all know means that Bucky will be going to Wakanda. Because that's how the laws of narrative work.
We didn't write the rules, Marvel did.
Marvel did. So obviously at some point in the future, Bucky will be going to Wakanda. That will be a whole drama. It will be amazing. I hope we get to run into some of our Wakandan favorites while we're there. I would love to see a scene between Bucky and M'Baku sparring off in sarcasm. That would be really fun. I'll take that.
More M'Baku.
More M'Baku. Yeah. Could Winston Duke just have all the things, please? So then we go to Sam, and Bucky's going to show up in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And they're going to have some really incredible, like, you know, Sam's kind of reaction to locale cap and like, Jesus Christ, what am I supposed to do now? Is to go sell his parents' boat. And kind of like clean up everything, like get his affairs in order. Cause like the resignation of like, oh, Jesus Christ, I've got stuff to do now. Now I do have to go be Cap.
Yeah.
Like, now I do have to go do this. He's got to do two things. He's got to stop and see Isaiah Bradley, and he's got to sell his parents' boat.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about Isaiah Bradley, and then let's talk about the boat, because that's a little bit more than with the training montage we get as well. So Isaiah Bradley.
Yeah, so he goes to visit Isaiah Bradley, again played brilliantly by Carl Lumley, who just goes for it, folks. He just goes for it. The long legacy of abuses against Black people and dismissal of Black heroes in this country, to quote the Vulture recap in front of my eyes.
Flings them around.
Yeah, Sam is a little bit like, what? A little bit too much like that for me. But his easy questioning feeds Isaiah's ability to just throw these knife points at him.
And I should say too, I would imagine that we have to remember Sam was a paratrooper.
Yeah.
Sam lost his partner, Riley, who we don't get a lot of, but he, was in trauma, had PTSD, possibly still has it, all those kind of other things. The amount of mental acrobats he may have already had to do, and the cognitive dissonance he already exists in, may be why he's like, what? Like, it's not, because in his mind, he took care of all of that, or whatever. It's still a little naive, but I think it might track a little bit better if we remember that he already had to jump through these mental hoops to be in the military.
Yeah, that's a totally valid point, and I'm so glad you interjected with it. And I think too, like they're setting up Isaiah and Sam. They have this whole series as like two sides of the coin of perspectives of Black men in the United States.
And Black men in the United States government, and how
and their relationship with the government and the military and all of that. And there's many sides to that coin. These are just two sides of them, and the show did such a great job of saying like neither one is right or wrong, but they have two different perspectives on this. And so you get like Isaiah Bradley just telling him like, don't be stupid. They're never going to let a Black man be Captain America, and no self-respecting Black man would ever want to be one.
Like, and mic drop, absolute mic drop moment. What is Sam supposed to say to that?
And what is he supposed to do with it? And I'm so glad that they gave him time and space to think about it. To think about how he felt about it, what that made him think about being Captain America, or what he wanted to do. And like, I love the boat fixing montage, but what it also did was give Sam time to process that, because that's real heavy stuff. And I would have been so disappointed if they had just been like, if they superheroed it and Sam was just like, well, that's not me. I'll show them who's Captain America. Like, they didn't treat Sam or us like idiots and gave him time to process it. Because I mean, there is no answer to that. And in a lot of ways, you can't look at Isaiah Bradley and be like, yeah, but I'm going to do it anyway, which eventually he did, but he had to get there through some work, and he still wasn't ready at that point to be Cap. And then he just needed a nudge from James. So he gets the nudge.
So I would like to talk about the nudge a little bit here, and about the how they stand around and kind of shoot the shit while they play Frisbee with the shield. And there's a lot within Sam and Bucky. And we talked about it a little bit at the beginning, that because of the chemistry of the actors, people have imprinted things on Sam and Bucky that may or may not actually exist.
Right.
Oh, now, Anthony Mackie was asked recently in an interview if he was comfortable, essentially, with fandom believing that Bucky and Sam were in a gay relationship together. And Anthony answered pretty much like, I don't think they are. And I think very much that we can have emotional men without them being gay. I think that's important too. It's a messy answer in a messy interview. Disney has a long history of ignoring queer stories, of literally canceling queer series, of doing all of those kind of things. Fandom bends queer in comic book and in fiction and in everything. Like Harry Potter fandom bends queer. West Wing fandom bent queer. Like it bends queer. And so
because people want to write the stories where they can see themselves.
the way they can see themselves.
Yeah.
And I can do a whole thing on why cisgendered heterosexual women like to read and write male romance. It's a fascinating thing about bodies and gender roles. But what I find fascinating about this scene is that I ship Sam and Bucky. I write Sam and Bucky fan fiction. I can see it. I don't see the show giving us that.
No.
What I see the show giving us is these two men that have learned how to be more fully human.
Mm-hmm.
Mackie's answer wasn't great. It caused a lot of consternation in fandom. People were really angry. And then they were really shocked that nobody else was angry. I was like, guys, this is one of those things that nobody that's not in fandom notices. And it was a clumsy answer. But the core of what he was saying, I think, is what is beautiful about this scene.
Yeah.
That it is these two men who have been on independent journeys. Bucky's a little bit more accelerated than Sam's was, or not accelerated, sorry, a little bit longer than Sam's was. I think Sam's has been more hyper driven in the last couple episodes. Bucky's obviously been on it since he woke up from the snap.
Yeah.
In a different way than Sam, that can now say, this is who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what the new call is. They've both finally figured out what life is like for them post Steve, post Tony's death, post Snapture. They figured it out. And this is what it's going to look like. They're going to be in each other's lives. They're not going to be in each other's pockets. Bucky does not want to be Captain America's sidekick. He did that game. He is not into that game anymore, but he really wants to be Captain America's best friend because that game worked. Mm-hmm. And so kind of what this all looks like, I would love more queer stories. I would love them with all of my heart. I also want more stories of men being emotional, of cisgendered heterosexual men being emotionally in touch with themselves. I want it all. And I even like what we're doing with John Walker, his slow and then completely abrupt descent into disassociative madness in a way. Like, I want more of these stories. I don't think that they set out to tell that they queer baited us along in a way.
No.
I know other people feel that way, and that is your absolute right to feel that way. What I see is that they baited us along and then gave us the payoff of men trying to become emotionally intelligent, which Lord knows we need more of on the screen.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to stuff we've said in earlier episode coverage, right? Of this idea of, using Dr. Jackson Katz's parlance of shallow masculinity as opposed to toxic masculinity. But I think, that was an intentional part of some of the themes they were drawing out, especially in comparison between Sam and John Walker, and Bucky and John Walker. And they're all on, John Walker refuses to see that there is a deeper version of masculinity for him. He is accepting that this is the only version he was given and trained to be, and that it's other people's problems for not understanding that that's what he was trained to be. And you have a sharp contrast to Bucky and Sam, who have been through the literal and figurative wars over the years and get to this place where they feel more comfortable being fully who they are and finding that deeper version of themselves, and their masculinity. And I agree with you. Like, that's beautiful to me. I can't think of another, show that focuses on superheroes that's kind of done that work with masculinity in that way. And I hope they continue to do it and maybe have more conversations about it. I also didn't think it was queer baiting. I don't spend any time in fandom except for what Dr. Kristen tells me. So she told me that was a big deal, and in fandom, or something that was written about a lot. And I hope, maybe they can queer Torres. I don't know. Like, the show should have more diversity in it in relation to a lot of things, but I don't think it's going to be with Sam and Bucky in a romantic relationship.
No, which is why I will continue to plant my flag for Bucky and Sarah.
Hello. So
Sarah.
much flirting. So much flirting.
So much flirting.
Yeah.
And Sebastian Stan, as an actor, keeps getting cast with women he doesn't have a whole lot of chemistry with. And so when I finally see him have chemistry with a woman, I'm like, chase it, chase it, chase it, chase it. He just, the movie he made with Shailene Woodley was like two pieces of wood acting against each other. Like, they both seem lovely, but God, they couldn't sell it. So really, really looking forward to maybe playing with that a little bit more. But we get to the end of the episode. We get a hint that we hear Sharon on the phone. She's talking to Batroc, who is always a mess. Every time he shows up, he's a chaos agent.
Yeah.
I think we get a pretty big hint that she's the power broker here. Carly is talking with Batroc as well. Never a good thing. Just again, he's a chaos agent. We don't ever want him. He wants to kill Sam. He has always wanted to kill Sam because he wants to kill anybody that he didn't already kill, basically. And what I like about, and this isn't just the Vulture recap, AV Club brought this out and a couple of the other ones, what this episode shows us is possibly where Marvel is moving. And when we look at the properties that are coming out, the second arc of the MCU is going to talk about what a hero is. Yeah. In a really interesting, diverse way. As we record this, Loki is airing. Neither one of us have seen it yet, but I know they're playing around with that a lot in that series. We're gonna, some of the stuff coming down the pike, I'm like looking at the Eternals is absolutely going to be about what being a hero is.
Oh yeah.
Claire Zhao plays with that anyway in her work, and then she's handed this Marvel property that's absolutely going to be part of what she plays with. So what does heroism look like? What does humanity look like? How do we do this all together? They're going to keep doing it in some really beautiful ways, and some really fecking frustrating ones, I'm sure, because it's a story told by humans about humans. And as much as I would love Sam and Bucky to do the smoochy smoochy immediately, it still needs to be it still needs to kind of stand on its own and be messy.
Yeah, and I think that's something that in a lot of the Marvel offshoot TV shows they have been building on for a long time. If I think back to Daredevil and Jessica Jones and all of those kind of individual focused Marvel properties that weren't Avengers related at the time, really heavy hitting on who gets to be what does it mean to be a hero, and complicated people with emotional trauma and good versus bad and all that kind of stuff. And you know, we've said this before, but it bears repeating. That first arc just had to go where it had to go. And now they can do other things, and it's exciting to see where
the first arc was Tony Stark's hero journey. That was the first arc.
It had to be all of that stuff with the Avengers and moving all of those pieces. And by God, what was it, like 22 movies or something?
21 over 11 years or something.
21 over 11 years. Like, it was a massive production
that they built as they were doing it. So like I'm more excited to see where arc 2 is going, because now that they know that there's an arc. Like, I look back to Iron Man 1, and one of the stories from Iron Man 1, this is still my favorite, is that it is not written into the script that he reveals that he's Iron Man at the end. Downey just improv'd that, changed the entire trajectory of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like,
yeah.
They have a plan now, thank God. So
yeah, I think I trust Kevin Feige more with the second arc. Now that they've seen where all the pieces from the first arc did and didn't fit together. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see where they can go, especially now that they're telling us that they might go places that complicate some things, or that talk about women or Black
and
folks.
have people of color.
What?
As non-sidekick roles. What?
You can put Don Cheadle in anything. I would pay to hear that man read me the phone book, but we didn't get a lot of exposition on Rhodey.
No, fandom loves Rhodey, and doesn't even love Rhodey as much as he deserves to be loved. The same with Sam. So it's been, we can talk about how stories told, fandoms told largely about white people breed the problems that we see across all stories about white people.
Yeah. But I think since we've gone a bit meta, talking about
sorry.
No, don't apologize. We both went there. Gone a bit meta with the whole MCU. We'll drill down to the end where we have this upcoming council meeting in New York. We've got Carly and Batroc and Sharon all machinating in their machinations, and John Walker tinkering with his janky. Still funny, y'all. I just love to talk about it because it makes me giggle. Fake Captain America shield, setting us up for the big conclusion,
which will absolutely be happening next week or next episode, depending on when we meet you and talk to you in this time. It was an episode that we definitely enjoyed, but definitely had some problems with. So it'll be one of our messier conversations in terms of plot cohesion. But there's some moments that we both really love. We can't wait to unpack them with you.
Yep, we'll see you guys then.